Hello, everybody, and welcome to the IAB and PWC full year and Q4 2016 Internet Ad Revenue Report. We will be beginning the webinar shortly. We're just going to give a couple of moments so that more people can join the webinar. So we are going to put you on mute, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the IAB and PWC full year and Q4 2016 Internet Ad Revenue Report briefing. My name is Christina Striginis, and I'm the Research Director here at the IAB. And I just wanted to give you a few brief housekeeping notes before we begin the presentations. So I wanted to point out to you the Q&A area on the BlueJeans interface. So we will be taking questions after the presentations, and we'll first take questions from reporters, and then we'll follow that by questions from our members. So at any time during the presentations, please type your questions into the chat box on the BlueJeans user interface to the right, and we will create a queue and answer as many of these questions as is possible following the presentations. If you still have any questions following the presentations, and feel free to contact us. Reporters can contact Laura Goldberg directly at laura.goldberg@iab.com, and IAB members can contact me directly at Christina with a K at iab.com. And with that, I am going to hand it over to David Doty.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for, as Christina said, the IAB Advertising Revenue Report for full year 2016 and Q4 2016. This has been prepared, as it has been for 21 years, by our colleagues at PWC. And I'd like to make a special thanks to David Silverman, partner at PWC, who has been involved with us for many years and helping us really create the gold standard of reports on advertising revenue and digital. So thank you, David. What's going to happen first is I will present the highlights of the report. Again, I'm David Doty, and I'm the Executive Vice President and CMO here at the IAB. Then Christina Striginis, whom you just heard from, she will present the Q4 report. David Silverman will provide the detailed analysis. We'll just do the highlights from IAB, and David Silverman will do the highlights. We're also pleased to welcome Peter Stubbs, who's a director at PWC, who's going to give us his insights on the trends driving digital growth and challenges for the year ahead. And then we'll get into Q&A. Christina, can you tell us a bit about Peter?
Yes, definitely. So we're happy to have our guest speaker here today, who, as David mentioned, is Peter Stubbs, director at PwC's Media and Entertainment Practice. Peter has over 20 years of experience in advertising strategy, customer analytics, and customer experience design. Peter leads many of PwC's advertising and marketing engagements across advertisers, agencies, and publishers, helping them to build the right capabilities to deliver new revenues, improve performance, and create engaging customer experiences. Having worked for many of the big established names in the ad industry, Peter brings a number of different perspectives together while also having experience building startups, ad tech businesses, and joint ventures. So we're very happy to have him with us today. One last point I wanted to make is that we will also be sharing all of the presentations that you're about to see, including the full report and the 20 years worth of reports after the presentation. So at 12 noon, you can go to iab.com/ad revenue report and you can find all of these webinar presentations and the reports. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Doty.
Thank you, Christina. So let's get into the highlights of 2016. This is the big number here. The total advertising revenues hit in full year 2016 a landmark $72.5 billion. That's a 22% increase from 2015, when last we met for a full year, obviously, when it was $59.6 billion. And the story here, again, is mobile. That's exactly what we said at the half-year report when last we were together about 6 months ago. Mobile is the real story. It is what is driving growth. Mobile dominated the full year of 2016 ad revenue earnings for the very first time, taking in more than 51% of all advertising revenue in digital and reflecting marketers' dedication to following consumers from what has been, what we've been calling for a long time, a mobile-first world. Well, I think now we're moving into pretty much a mobile-only one. Moreover, mobile saw a 77% increase year over year, so we truly are seeing significant momentum in mobile. Mobile advertising, as you can see in this chart, mobile revenue, it's up 10 times since the full year, which you see on your left-hand side, since full year 2012, when it was at $3.4 billion, and it has now blossomed into a $36.6 billion business at the end of full year 2016. You'll also see, because we've divided these in halves here, that mobile growth takes place not only in full year measurements, but also in the half-year subsets. Let's turn to video, because while mobile is the story, it is also contributing to video growth, which is in and of itself up 53% to a record $9.1 billion. The mobile story, as I said, continues here. You see here that video sees a 145% increase year over year via mobile devices to $4.2 billion. Desktop video is also up 16% year over year to $4.9 billion in FY 2006. We're also seeing healthy results in display and search revenue, but much of it driven, of course, by mobile. Total display in full year 2016 is up 28% to $31.9 billion. Total banners are up 21% to $22.8 billion. That means that banners, despite some people's prediction that they were declining, now account for nearly 1 in 3 internet ad dollars. Mobile display, which is truly driving the display market, advertising is up 65% to $18.1 billion. Mobile banners show a similar pattern, up 51% to $13.9 billion. But display and desktop is down by 5% to $7.4 billion. Total search revenues up 19% to $35 billion, which means search accounts for 48% of total internet revenue. The mobile momentum continues in search as well, as you would expect, with mobile search having grown 91% to $17.2 billion. But desktop search, it's down 13% to $17.8 billion. As this chart shows, total ad revenue across mobile and desktop has grown by double-digit percentages in video, banner, and search from full year 2015. 53% in video, 21% in banner, and 19% in total search. And total, by that term we mean mobile plus desktop. And we have some big news here in the audio category. We have broken out digital audio as a separate component of this report for the first time this year because digital audio revenues hit $1.1 billion, surpassing the threshold necessary for PWC to reliably report on a specific category like this. So this is big news. And you will see also here the mobile story continues. 81% of the revenue that we see in audio is coming from mobile. We have reason to believe that this category, audio ad revenue, will continue to see an uptick in future reports because of this real strong showing this year. Let's get into the social media dimension of this. In mobile and desktop, it's up 50% to $16.3 billion. So it still has a very strong position in the digital media mix, of course. Social media accounts for 22% of total digital ad revenue in 2016, as you see there on the right-hand side. Now, mobile combined with desktop shows a true picture of total digital formats. In the past, what you see on the right-hand side, we would report mobile as a kind of as a separate format. On the left-hand side, you'll see what we've been doing since the half-year report last time, where we combine it into the other formats. So you see total search, total banner, total digital video, total other on the left-hand side. That includes mobile. If we were to separate them out as we historically did, you would see the results on the right-hand side. But expect us to track things as you see them from now on the left-hand side. This reconfirms, by the way, the dominance of mobile. So, mobile video is up 145% to $4.2 billion. Mobile banner is up 51% to $13.9 billion. Mobile search is up 91% to $17.2 billion. To put a fine point on it, in case you didn't hear that this is about mobile, mobile, mobile. And when we look at other media, digital continues its growth patterns while those other media slow or decrease. This is a trend we've seen in the past. Internet has now surpassed all other media, and you see that in some cases there's a slight growth. In most cases, there is a slowing in the growth, or a decrease even. So now I would like to ask Christina Struginis to present the results on digital ad revenues in Q4 2016. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. So now we're going to focus on Q4 2016 highlights. And the first thing I wanted to point out is that we saw that overall the full year growth was 22% year over year. When we look at Q4 2016, we see that the growth is even more, 24% growth year over year between Q4 2016 and the previous year. So that number is $21.6 billion in ad revenue for digital ad revenues in Q4 2016. And by comparison, I want to show you that on the right hand, if you see the data provided by Nielsen, we see that total media revenues increased only by 1% during this time frame. So in comparison, we can see that we are seeing double-digit growth versus single-digit growth and some declines in traditional media. So looking further into traditional media formats, we see that while TV was up during Q4 2016 compared to Q4 2015, print and radio declined. And again, contrast that with the 24% growth for internet ad revenue. Also, another point I wanted to bring up is CPMs. So moving back to digital, this chart, which has been provided to us by Squad Web Costs, shows the average monthly CPM trend across the year of all buys placed within the month for both video and display ads. So looking at digital CPMs, we can see that the average in-stream video CPM rose by about 1% over 2016 to achieve nearly $25 by year's end. Display ad CPMs steadily grew throughout the election year, also growing by the end of the year to about $15, which is a 15% growth from the beginning of 2016. In total, the average CPM for in-stream video in 2016, according to Squad, was $24.55, and for display ads, that was $13.88. And breaking down display CPMs further by looking at 8 specific categories, we see that most category CPMs have trended up throughout the year. The average monthly CPM for these 8 categories for display ads was $13.22, according to Squad. And in total, this shows that strong growth in display ad revenue has been exhibited throughout the year. And this further implies that brand advertising is doing well. And with that, I'll turn it back to David Doty, who will summarize the key findings.
Thank you, Christina. So once again, we see that Q4 is really a driver of revenues that is an important part of the year. We generally see Q4 stronger than other quarters, and so I'm glad to see that we're going in the right direction in Q4. So let's look at what some of the implications we can draw from this. That in one of them is that brand spending continues to rise. When we see total display advertising revenue, mobile plus desktop, accounting for 44% of total ad revenue, we believe that reflects marketers' belief in using digital to reach their consumers where they are, when they're there. As Christina was talking about impression-based revenues being up, that also tells us something about the competition for really great digital advertising environments. Total digital video, which we also believe marketers use for sight, sound, motion to portray their most important messages to their consumer. It accounts for 13% of ad revenue. That's up from 10% a year ago. So that tells us the same story. Audio, as we've mentioned, audio is a particularly intimate form of advertising that reaches people in a very different way than sight, sound, and motion when it's actually in their heads. And I think that shows another facet of marketers choosing to make digital a place where they can reach their consumers in ways that they haven't, they wouldn't be able to elsewhere, because their consumers are changing their media consumption habits. And CPMs have also trended up, as Christina has said, over the last 6 months. So, it wouldn't be any surprise if I said, really, the only key takeaway is mobile, and mobile again. So as consumer usage has shifted to mobile, that's reflected in an ad revenue shift to mobile. Ongoing double-digital growth across formats and platforms in digital persists in an otherwise flat media market. Digital audio has gone large enough for its own breakout at $1.1 billion. And not that because you haven't heard this before, I will re-emphasize it. It's all about mobile, but it's about mobile across video and audio and search, social, and banners. So, thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to welcome David Silverman, partner at PWC.
Thank you, David and Christina, and a heartfelt thanks to the IAB again for having us involved for the past 21 years in this project. It's truly been amazing to watch this industry grow over 21 years. We've got a nice slide a little bit further in the deck that will be a little bit of a snapshot about that growth, so I'll save that for then. And just another reminder that our survey will be available on the IAB website. So as I mentioned numbers and all the numbers that Christina and David had previously mentioned, they will be available in the report, so no need to keep copious notes on my presentation. We're going to cover the methodology for our report real briefly, and then we'll get into the results. In terms of the methodology, the IAB Internet Advertising Report is really a key ongoing IAB mission to measure the growth and the size of the market and key changes in the market. The survey is different than others in the market in that we obtain a good portion of the data directly from companies that are generating the revenues. We make our survey as inclusive as possible, and it is a very confidential process. So for the companies that do participate, we ensure that their data remains very confidential. And in fact, many of the questions sometimes that we get relate to specific breakouts that we can't provide because of that confidentiality. We begin with a compilation of companies that are selling internet advertising. We start with the IAB membership, which is obviously a great place to start, and then we scour industry publications, etc., to identify any new material entrant into the space to make sure that we're capturing the right companies for our survey. We acquire additional information from public sources to supplement for companies that either respond or companies that aren't responding or aren't responding fully. We compile that information and produce this report twice a year. And as David had previously mentioned, we saw this year revenues going from $59.6 billion up $12.9 billion, or close to 22%, to $72.5 billion. And for the fourth quarter, it went from $17.4 billion in the prior fourth quarter to $21.6 billion, up $4.2 billion, or 24.3%. And between Q3 and Q4, we saw it go from $18.2 billion up to $21.6 billion, or roughly 19%. That 19% was the largest single successive quarter-on-quarter increase since 2003. So that is a big number for Q-on-Q growth. Here's the chart I was talking about. That is the snapshot of our 21 years of hard work compiling this data in one graph. And as you can see, back in 1996, there wasn't as much revenue to count, so it was a little bit easier. It's gotten progressively harder. A couple of takeaways from this slide is that we've seen year-on-year quarter growth since 2009. And then other than the decline that you'll see from Q4 to Q1 in each of the years, it's been quarter-on-quarter growth since 2009 as well. So since 2009, been a very robust string of increases. We also have noticed that seasonality is becoming a greater factor as the industry continues to mature. We see that the Q4 to Q1 decreases are becoming steeper. In 2013, the decrease from Q4 to Q1 was 5%. That's increased gradually over each of the next successive 3 years to where it's now 9% in 2016. And we also noticed, though, on the opposite side, the increases from Q3 to Q4 are also getting larger. So back in 2013, there was a 14% increase from Q3 to Q4. And in the current year, as I mentioned, it was close to 19%. Over the past 10 years, the industry has recorded a compounded annual growth rate of 16%, which is absolutely phenomenal for an industry that is in its 21st year. What's even more phenomenal is that if you calculate the CAGR for the last 5 years, it's actually 18%. So for the reasons that David mentioned, I think he might have mentioned the word mobile, it's actually increased over the last few years. And here we can see the impact that mobile has had on that compounded annual growth rate over that 5-year period. It's gone up 87% on a compounded annual growth rate, whereas the desktop has increased at 6%. And while the desktop amount, the increase might seem like it's small from a compounded annual growth rate, it's actually, you got to remember that this is not the desktop declining. It's that the eyeballs are shifting and people are just viewing these ads on different devices. So it's almost becoming ubiquitous in terms of where the consumer is seeing the ad. We had a lot of questions around concentrations of revenue in the past, and we've tracked the top 10 companies serving internet advertisements the top 25, and then the rest. And we've been doing that on a quarterly basis since the inception of the survey. And what we found is that largely it's remained consistent within a relatively tight band, ranging from 69% as high as 75% on a quarterly basis. Here are annual summaries over the past 10 years. And you can see that it's ranged from, in this case, 69 to 74%, where it's remained the last 2 years. And even within the year, we've seen a slight decrease to 73% in Q4 of 2016. The other thing that is interesting that we found is that growth is coming across all bands. So all different companies are growing within the industry. And then the other thing that's of interest is during that 10-year period, of the top 10 years ago, only 4 of those companies remain in the top 10 in 2016. So there's constant change within the industry. Talking about change in the industry, this one I think sums it up. As David might have mentioned, mobile before is now taking over 50%, 51% of the advertising dollars. And to the right of mobile are the traditional formats. These relate specifically to desktop, though. So search, banner, digital video, and other as it relates to the desktop revenues. And you can see the declines in each year over the last 5 or 6 years, with the exception of digital video desktop, which has remained relatively strong. So you're probably asking, well, where is all that 51% of the revenues going when it comes to formats? And as you can see, it's going 48% to search, 31% to display, 13% to video, and 8% to other. When we look at it year on year, you can see that search went down as a percentage of the overall revenue from 50% to 48%, but it actually increased from a dollar basis, up $5.5 billion, and actually up 19%. Video gained in terms of share from 10% to 13%. And when it comes to video, what's driving that gain, as David mentioned previously, is its growth on mobile. We saw the overall digital video increase $3.1 billion, up 52% from the prior year. The shift in mobile video was primarily in mobile, 145% growth year on year, and its increase of the overall video, 29% in the prior year was on mobile devices, up to 45% in the current year. And desktop video, while not growing quite as strong, still grew at 16% on the desktop. I think the other big story is social media, and that kind of gets lost in the mobile numbers, but it's actually helping fuel both not only the mobile, but it's also helping fuel the video as well, as consumers of social are doing it on mobile devices, and they're also increasing the viewing of videos on these devices. On a compounded annual growth rate over the past 4 years, it's increased 54%, rising from $2.9 billion in 2012 to $16.3 billion in 2016. It was up $5.4 billion from 2015, when it was $10.9 billion. This $5.4 billion increase from the prior year represents 42% of the full year's growth. So 42% of the total revenue growth was coming from social media related. And on this slide, we can see how social media and mobile impact the overall revenues. In 2012, social media contributed 8% of the overall industry's revenues. It now makes up 22% of the industry's revenues. And revenues on mobile devices went from 9% in 2012 to 51% in the current year. So clearly, 2 huge demographic changes that have occurred that have impacted the revenue. One is the acceptance of social media and the use of social media, and then the monetization of social media, which has generated strong revenue growth in the industry. And then secondly, the proliferation of smartphones and devices that have become in everybody's hands. Basically, everybody's carrying around a supercomputer in their pockets and able to browse the internet. Digital audio as David mentioned, made its debut in our report this year. It wasn't enough for marketers to follow the eyeballs on digital media. They now are following eardrums as well. And with $1.1 billion in revenue, 81% of that on mobile devices, it's clear that this is becoming a significant category, one in which we believe with key demographic changes in terms of consumer behavior as well as unlimited data plans, this is a category that will likely see strong growth in the future. On the pricing model, impression-based pricing was 33% of the category in 2015, went up to 35% in 2016. On a longer historical trend, we see that it's gravitated in the low 30s, peaking back up to 35% is the highest we've seen since 2009. And then lastly, we track who's advertising on the internet, and we see that retail, financial services, auto, telecom, and travel make up almost 2/3 of the advertising dollars. With that, I thank you, and I'll turn it over to Peter.
Thank you, David. I'm going to talk for 10-15 minutes about some of the drivers behind the data that we've seen today, and I'll also talk about some of the challenges we face. So you may have heard us mention the word mobile in the last two previous commentaries. Mobile, of course, now represents over 50% of internet advertising, but we're also at another key milestone for the industry, which is that internet advertising as a whole has overtaken broadcast. So we're no longer about engaging with consumers that were just using traditional channels. We're in a very different world than we were a decade ago. And in fact, if we look back to the history of the reports that we've been doing, we're really dealing with a digital consumer. In their very nature, they've changed. The way we read books, we watch videos, we buy food, we buy household goods, we research a new car, a new house, we're going on holiday, or even finding true love. Consumers have completely changed the way they behave. So in terms of thinking about this, we've thought about three key drivers. So of course, it's you, it's me, it's our kids, right? It's not about generation X, Y, and Z. It's about all of us. We're all digital in our very core, in our lifestyles, and we'll talk a little bit more again about why mobile is a driver to that. But before I do that, of course, this is old news, right? We've known this for a long time. It's about where eyeballs have been going, but in some respects, we're a bit of a slow industry. We're a slow, fast industry, really. And what I mean by that is we're a fast industry because if you think about the way in which we place ads, we time things in milliseconds as complex decisions are made across ad ecosystems just to place that single ad. But actually, we're a slow business because it's taken us a long time to follow those eyeballs, or I should, as you referred to earlier, David, talk about our eardrums as well, recognising the importance of the growth of digital audio. But it's taken us a long time. It's taken us a long time because we had to convince advertisers of the merits and the metrics of new channels. We had to figure out new economies and ecosystems and standards. And more importantly, we've had to figure out how digital fits in with our traditional channels of broadcast, radio, outdoor and print. So, mobile's really come of age. Devices are no longer something that we just use for making calls. In fact, for many, I think that might be one of the least used functionalities of the device. They've crossed our work lives, our home lives and play, and they're the real driver behind making us those digital consumers. But again, this is kind of old news. But that's the point. We've been really slow to adopt mobile too. We all knew eyeballs and eardrums were going mobile as we moved from mobile to mobile first to mobile only. But again, it's taken time. I, for one, have been standing up at conferences probably for the last 5 or 6 years saying this is the year of mobile. But thank God, I think this year I'm glad to say we made it. And actually, it happened pretty quickly. then very quickly, video. We've talked about video going mobile. For my sins, I'm a commuter and I spend a good 2 hours a day sitting on a train. You only have to look around the carriage to see the other passengers using their devices. And when you're nosy and look over their shoulders, they're usually watching video in one form or another, whether that's streaming OTT or direct offerings, or video-based social media, as David talked about, news, weather, sports, or even in-app experiences and advertising. Video advertising on mobile devices creates such an incredible opportunity for us in advertising. And it lends ourselves to exciting new ways of contextual engagement, getting customer feedback, using location-based services, even gaming and augmented reality. I probably couldn't get away without mentioning Pokemon as we come to its 12 months anniversary. And that really opened our eyes to the potential of both gamification, AR and location-based services. So we know mobile and video are big drivers of growth, but let's also talk about some of the challenges, and some of which we've already touched on. So trust, of course, is the basis of any healthy relationship. And this year we've seen a number of breakdowns in trust across the digital advertising supply chain. We've seen many high-profile announcements by some of our best-known brands. And there's 4 key issues eroding trust in the supply chain. 1, a lack of transparency in campaign performance and success. Incomplete and insufficient ad performance metrics. Ad impression fraud and non-human traffic, including bots. And poor customer experiences of digital ads. But of course, as an industry, we've been responding to these things in a number of ways. Firstly, there's a range of initiatives in place to create greater transparency from organisations by people like the IAB and, of course, the MRC, the Media Ratings Council, and vendors and suppliers and content owners are all working to improve this issue. Secondly, some organisations are exploring new ways to bring capabilities closer to home and in-house, perhaps changing the way they work with their agencies and partners. And finally, and when we're looking to the future a bit here, there are numerous blockchain initiatives where people are exploring the opportunity for blockchain to solve some of the challenges by serving as a single secure source of trust. This approach is probably 4 or 5 years away, not only technically, but also in terms of who and how it could be administered to the industry. So let's talk about programmatic video and the rise of addressable TV. We talked about the huge rise in video, and of course much of this is being bought programmatically. And many of the major networks are also offering varying levels of sophisticated audience targeting. Much of the exciting opportunities are coming from addressable TV that in many ways kind of merges the boundaries between broadcast and digital advertising, offering optimal TV spots at household level in real time. But it's also fair to say it's got some of its challenges. Firstly, it's got challenges around viewability. There's a lack of standards across disparate operators. There's no standard measurement to allow kind of cross-platform tracking and ROI. And there's questions around the quality of the inventory available. The next one is that proliferation of channels and choice and the cross-platform play. We've all read the stats that millennials use a second device whilst watching TV. It's a slight confession here, but of course that's not exclusive from my own experience to millennials. But we use devices whilst watching the main screen, and it's increasingly more difficult to capture and retain our viewership. Wandering eyeballs and ears create a new mandate to engage consumers across a variety of channels with either travelling content or new and more engaging interactive experiences. The challenge here is that most organisations, both publishers and advertisers, are very much structured around channels, which is why we talk about second screens when really we should be talking about screen agnostic. But being channel or screen agnostic or just cross-device is in reality pretty hard to do. It means often manually joining up channels, technology, people and processes which are currently in silos. However, it's an area of huge demand, and therefore the potential rewards for those who get it right is high. Ad blocking, of course, continues to rise in the US, and in some respects is our own fault, resulting from a race to automate and scale digital advertising. In the press, we often talk about ad blocking war as an arms race between technology versus transparency and creativity. And the answer must surely lie not just in technology and transparency, but in creativity, and the creativity that's driven around people. Publishers and advertisers will need to work together to create solutions that result in compelling and relevant experiences that people are not inclined to block. So the more we can create contextual content that's part of the experience and relative to people and not seen as interrupting or intruding on the experience is more likely or not to be not blocked. And of course, this is much easier said than done. When we think about how we deliver ads, we get onto operations and the executions of advertising. Traditionally, our advertising operations were designed around channels, in how we plan, buy, sell, create, deliver and measure. For many of those channels were not digital, and even for those who were pure digital channels, the pure proliferation of new channels has just continued to add to the complexity. For advertisers, we're seeing many big brands take more control of their digital marketing, building more in-house capability, not only to gain greater control, but to utilise their first-party data better and use customer insights more effectively. We're also seeing advertisers build organisations that are more responsive and agile, with the ability to produce campaigns in minutes and hours, as opposed to days, or even, dare I say it, months. Agencies are changing too, and we're seeing significant restructuring with many of the largest agency groups refocusing around clients and customers and not channels. Agencies are continuing to build new capabilities and use technology and data more strategically to track buys to eyes to buys across channels and devices, and do so in real time with accuracy and increasing transparency. And of course, and finally, publishers are also reorganising themselves. Traditionally, print and TV publishers that are now playing in the digital ecosystem have been creating more innovative solutions and content in order to maintain audiences, engage offline, online and on demand. This in turn has led them to reorganise not only their operations, but how they price and sell inventory to explore new ways of maintaining value in an increasingly programmatic world. And finally, I'll just talk quickly about talent. We've spent the last few years really searching for the mythical data scientists who will mysteriously turn our data into gold. Now, of course, I don't disagree that the very heart of driving relevant and contextual experiences is data. But with the growth of video and mobile, it takes highly agile teams with different skills to put together something truly special. It takes creatives, engineers, data scientists, planners and operations to make them impactful. So the challenge is not to find individual talent, but it's more a question of how we bring teams together more effectively behind our objectives. So just to close, we're in an incredible period of growth for digital advertising, and the internet industry becomes the greatest share of the advertising industry. There are still many challenges, but of course this fosters a period of great opportunity and innovation. The winners will be those who can continue to develop creative advertising that's contextual and relevant to people, and create experiences that seem natural and unobtrusive. Now, we all know none of this is easy to do, which is why we need to think about how we organise ourselves to bring the right capabilities to bear as publishers, agencies or advertisers, from strategy, planning, execution and through to measurement. David, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Very insightful. Really appreciate that, and thank you, David, for that as well. We're soon going to move into the question and answer period, but just before we do, I wanted to point out something else. You were making me think about this, Peter, when you were talking. You know, we're not just talking about advertising here. We're talking about other things as well. And what we learned from a study that IAB put out recently, an economic impact study, which you can find on IAB.com by Professor Dayton from Harvard, was that all of these advertisements that we're talking about are not just about media. They're actually contributing $1 trillion to the U.S. economy and representing 6% of the country's GDP that way, and also driving jobs. about over 10 million of them, about 7.3% of total U.S. non-farm employment. So I think when we talk about this, putting it in the larger picture of the country, the economy, and the world is always a good thing to do. So thank you very much. So now we're going to take a few minutes and look through the questions and try and answer, as Christina said, the reporter questions first. Hold on one moment.
Type your questions in.
Okay, can we see all the
Okay, we're going to answer a first question that is how much of total media revenue in digital is going to Facebook and Google, and David Silverman will give us his responses.
So as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the process is very confidential, so we never talk about any individual company or even a group of 2 or 3 companies that can be attributable to a company. Because we get this question asked often, what I would say is to go back to the revenue concentrations, and if you looked at the top 10 companies, for the year they made up 74%. They made up 74% in the prior year. So as you can see, the top 10 as a group would have grown consistent with the overall industry. When we look at the top 10 in the fourth quarter of 2016, they comprise 73% of the industry, yet only 69% of the growth came from those top 10 companies. So what you can infer from that is that the rest of the growth was coming from the rest of the industry, so from companies 11 through infinity. So the rest of the industry was still contributing a significant amount of the revenue growth.
Thank you, David. We're going to look at questions again now. Okay, so we have another question on the overlap of social and mobile revenues. And David Silverman, would you please?
So that's a good question, and I should have pointed it out. There's clearly an overlap. Those are not unique, right? So social is viewed on desktop and on mobile devices, and so the portion that relates to mobile is in the mobile numbers as well. And as I mentioned in the presentation, that social is clearly driving or helping drive growth in the mobile sector. Same thing with video. So there could be social and video. Social really cuts across formats.
Okay, we're going to go on mute for another moment while we look at all the questions we've got coming in.
There was a question from someone about rich media, and so one of the things I would like to highlight is in the past we did track rich media as well as a couple of other categories that rolled up into display, and we are no longer tracking those separately. Given the growth in other categories that we think become more significant. Rich media is included in the banner category of display and continues to be, an essential part of campaigns. So it's part of the numbers, but we're no longer separating it out in our presentation.
So Peter Stubbs from PWC is going to take the next question here.
I think it was just about
I think that's just a general question on whether some of the content from my proportion of the presentation and the research behind it is available. I'm sure the audio will be available for listening to again, but and a slight plug is a lot of the information I'm referring to will come from our sector insights that will be part of our media and entertainment outlook that we publish later this summer.
Thank you, Peter.
And there was a question on performance-based pricing, and given fraud in the industry, why do we not see a bigger push to more performance in the industry? I would just say, I think our survey, has shown that performance-based advertising plays a significant part in the overall ad mix, but so does CPM and impression-based. They're for different purposes, and in some cases, advertisers can even purchase on a CPM basis, and through the use of algorithms and whatnot, are able to achieve performance-based results as well. So I think the fact of the matter is that impression-based certainly plays a key part in the industry, and we wouldn't likely see that go away.
So this is David Doty, thanking everyone for joining us, thanking our partners at PWC, and look forward to the 6-month report for 2017 when we get there. Thank you all for joining us. Christina.
And I just wanted to remind everybody that you can find all of the webinar presentations that you just heard, both in recording format and also in PDF format. And you can also find the report in addition to all of the reports that IAB and PWC have been releasing since 1996, all available at iab.com/ad revenue report. And if you think of any further questions and you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out. Press can reach out to Laura Goldberg at the address on the screen. And anybody else can reach out to me, Christina@IAB.com. And with that, I wanted to thank everybody for spending an hour with us and enjoying the reports. And see you in 6 months.